Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Overview of Data Collection, Why It's Important in Regenerative Medicine, including physician data accuracy in the online patient journey. You can submit text questions by typing into the Q&A pane on the control panel and send your questions at any time during this presentation. We'll collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Now I will turn the presentation over to your first presenter, Dr. Jay Bowen.
Good evening. I'd like to thank everyone for joining the webinar. My name is Jay Bowen, and I am a founding member and partner in Data Biologics. And we'll be talking a little bit about data collection, and hopefully I can give you some insight into what it is and why it's important and why you should consider doing it. So let's keep moving forward. We have some information that hopefully we can get through, but not too fast, and give you some information that's pertinent and valuable to for your time. So the objectives are to assist people in selecting appropriate treatment procedures that would both be applicable to patients as well as physicians. Also to consider when you are adopting early disruptive technologies that is targeted specifically to the needs of your particular patients, to improve outcomes, and also to consider future treatments. It'll also hopefully simplifies care, being cost effective, and reducing adverse events as you adopt some new techniques, novel treatments. So why do we collect data? Well, there's probably lots of reasons. We'll go over a few, but to take the quote standard of care, or the things we do currently, and to compare them to new things that we have some experience or our colleagues have experience in, to see if they may be of better outcomes to our patients, whether reduced safety, better efficacy, combination. So that's at least one thing to try to advance medicine. We also want to know how an individual themselves are doing versus their peers, or how healthcare system is doing with other people in the healthcare system, and adopting different potential treatment algorithms. Insurers, or at least payers, may want to know so they can control costs, or at least understand expectations of costs. And probably most importantly, patients really, should know and want to know these things so that they can have information for informed decisions, including things such as cost that, traditional physicians don't talk much about, true adverse events, and outcomes, or expected post-procedure, post-treatment course. And then also specific populations, which I would really think it's part of your individual patient population and not just some extrapolation from a research study you read. And also hopefully maybe altruistic and just adding to the body of literature that's out there for your peers and patients and society. So the scientific method we use is to look at evidence-based medicine. And I came across this sort of term probably 20 years ago or so, and I think it's sort of butt kissed at that time. I still sort of believe the same thing. We have three different sort of overlapping concerns that potentially combine together to give us some true evidence to base our treatments, or at least make us feel better. And hopefully by the end of this, I'll give you some change in my philosophy on it. But, it seems like we're just trying to prove what we normally do and what's normally paid for, than really trying to be disruptors and find out what's best for patients and society. So people like to throw this term around a lot, but the problem is we also don't have a lot of measures that are validated, such as blood pressure, something simple that we know that can be controlled and impact cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. But in many disciplines of medicine, we don't have that validated measure to, work against or work toward with our treatments. So we have observations. We look at those observations. We start advancing to higher levels of research or evaluation of care until we get to this sort of gold standard of the randomized, placebo-controlled, double-blinded trial. And yet, we're not sure if that's really the best thing. We're told that. So should it really be the gold standard for clinical medicine? Well, let's go back to our history, right? If we don't know history, we're doomed to repeat it. So hopefully we'll repeat the history of the 17th century and we'll start doing careful observations, rigorous skepticism that's hopefully apolitical and trying to just get at the truth and not with some agenda that it's what we do every day or what pays the bills. Formulate a hypothesis, start experimenting and refining that hypothesis to really get to the core. The problem with a lot of this, it becomes difficult either ethically or practically to do this with surgery or even some procedurally based treatments. So then we look at it and we say, well, all right, it's been done. We have these great RCTs and we read about them and it's similar to what we do. But the first question is, was the research actually conducted appropriately? How many subjects were lost to follow-up? If it was a large number, is it really then valid conclusions? Was there really a true control or just a less effective treatment? Was there a power analysis? And if you have 10 people and 9 of them are cured of something that's pretty devastating, that's a large power, large effect. And yet if people disagree with it, they say it's a small number. And yet in a lot of pharmaceutical research studies, they show 10,000 patients and they only show a 6-point reduction in hypertension. Is that truly clinically relevant? Or is that statistically relevant? We look at things that the FDA allows, something called relative and absolute risk, which is a problem. If you have 10,000 individuals that have a normal control of 3 episodes of problems, and you institute a treatment in another 10,000 patients, and you reduce it by 1 and only 2 problem outcomes, you have a 0.000001% reduction. So how can you market that? But on a relative risk, you've reduced it by 33 to 30%, right? You reduced it from 3 problems to 2 problems. So it's a third or a 33% reduction. And so you can market it that way, which sounds much more desirable. But in practicality, probably something that shouldn't be done. So again, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. So we have to be careful and understand as we read these papers. You know, if you treat a population that's excluded in the paper, then is that really applicable to that population you treat? And, you know, if it's not similar to your patients, then maybe that's not something you should really concern yourself with. So, you know, why do we actually read and look at research? Because we want this data so we can direct our daily patient care, impact what we do with patients and render the best care. A few years back, there was actually a publication that demonstrated or discussed that there are more meta-analysis that year published than there was new novel research. I think that's a problem with their editors, a problem with their journals, that, you know, we have more guidelines and experts consensus. And unfortunately, those guidelines become almost gospel, like laws of physics. And if we deviate from them, you know, you're held accountable by boards, by insurance companies, by regulators. And yet it's just a bunch of old white hair guys in ivory white towers who are lost to practical daily care of a patient. And you're held to that standard. So we want real world data. What happens in every day, the messiness of real world data. And we want it to be easily extractable, accessible, searchable, and relatable so we can make decisions for our daily patient care. You know, we have these electronic medical records that have tons of data, billions of data points, but it's so large that data scientists actually have difficulty concluding and evaluating this data because it's so large and coming to some kind of recommendation of what we should be doing in care. So historically, looking at measures that we used to evaluate people in research, we looked at motion, strength, imaging, sometimes a single scale motion or notion. But was that really relatable to the patient? We didn't consider their work, their hobbies. Those were weakly associated with relevant outcomes to the patient, and for that matter, society. There were varying and multiple different conclusions. Why? Because everybody had a different definition. If you have a wrist fracture and you have 3 or 4 different surgical or non-surgical ways to treat it, and you have 96 to 99% healing, is that actually the outcome that matters? If none of them can pick up a coffee cup because there's too much pain with grip, then I don't know if that outcome was really valid. And noticeably absent in a lot of outcomes measures are adverse events. They're glossed over and they're not really looked at in detail. Above all, do no harm. So we need to make sure we're looking at adverse events. So we started looking at, or people started developing something called patient-reported outcomes. They look at a variety of different measures and qualities from life, personal, adverse events, and they were able to be developed to be valid and reliable. They're completed by the patient, and we're able to look at the different components of the treatments. So we were involved in something when I was a fellow in 1994 or so. We started looking at this, and it was pen and paper, and I got the lovely task of trying to sort a lot of this out. We were the only non-surgical group in it, and it was definitely labor intensive. And yet they terminated prematurely, and potentially that was partly because it didn't really sort of prove what they wanted to prove, that potentially surgery was better than non-surgery. But for whatever reason, they didn't really complete it, and they noticed several difficulties. One is busy, especially orthopedic offices. They just couldn't capture the data. Difficulty enrolling the patients. It wasn't simple. Difficulty following and tracking these patients because it wasn't easy to get the patients to, give that feedback. Again, this was before everybody having a little computer called a smartphone. So everything was pen and paper and mailed questionnaires. People didn't respond, and you had to track these responses and enter them into a database and call people who didn't, respond and follow up on these people. And there are a lot of hidden costs that really weren't anticipated when people signed up to be part of this. So if you look at, there was a lot of people enrolled that didn't have follow-up. There are a lot of people who were enrolled who actually hadn't even completed baselines. So when you look at people that had returned and looked at the outcomes measures, 17% had total knee replacements, 20% had total hip replacements, and they didn't return for follow-up for 7 to 9 months. So a lot of holes, a lot of problems, but this gave us some insight into how we needed to collect data. So we've been trying to do this for multiple years and multiple ways, and technology has enabled us to do something unique more recently we'll get into. But if you look at the FDA, like, oh, they don't really care, right? Well, actually, no. You look at the FDA said with different people that real world evidence is actually important, and they look at it as it's something you can rely on to the next step for more submissions, supportive evidence, next stage of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials, whatever it is. But this has definitely influenced the FDA, and I think as it gets more refined, we'll have more validity and more power in this realm. So if we look at these patient-reported outcomes, the legacy or older measures that are still used quite a bit, published in the journals that we look at, can be either general overall responses or representations of the patient, or it can be very specific to, say, joint, or a combination of both. However, these, as talked about before, are noticeably absent about adverse event questions. So PROMIS, a lot of money was put in from the NIH and our tax dollars into PROMIS in developing this. It's validated. It's got a large database. It's got multiple measures. It can be pen and paper all the way up to a computer adaptive model, has multiple languages, and it's been used in many publications. So maybe people on the call or listening to this recording later have not heard of PROMIS, but PROMIS has been published in thousands of publications. And actually there's greater use of it, and it's smaller times, so it can be a smart kind of thing that if it says you can't walk upstairs, it's not going to ask you if you can run a mile. And so it can get it down to 4 to 12 questions, which can be done by the person very quickly, and probably increases compliance as they know it's not going to take them a long time as a patient. So the benefits and promise, there's fewer measures from conventional questionnaires, and it's validated across comparisons with multiple legacy measures. So if you have something like the COOS that's published in an orthopedic journal and you do a promise, you can actually compare to old data and see if you're doing something different, if it is comparable or improved or different from previous publications. That's the problem with some of the previous legacy measures, is everyone wanted to use their own. And if you didn't use what someone else was using, you couldn't compare. So promise is sort of that universal translator that can help us compare across disciplines and techniques. So in promise, there's fewer questions, less time consuming, and those probably both lead to improved responsiveness. Can also be correlated with legacy measures. So there are multiple current registry efforts, specifically regarding orthobiologics and regenerative medicine. The problem is there are limited options in this realm. Some of them are closed groups that if you're not a member, you can't use it. Some are surgically focused, and if that's not something you do, it may not be applicable. And even though there's been a lot of time and money invested in some of these registries, there's a lack of published data. So people are putting a lot of effort in these, and yet not a lot's actually going out into the realm and impacting society or medical care. So we started Data Biologics, myself and another couple of physicians, and we're sort of boots on the ground doctors that when we do this, we make our decisions with our clients in mind, as well as us doing this on a daily basis, being some of the experts in orthobiologics. So we understand, what's practical. So our moniker by Dr. Malanga has been SUP, simple, user-friendly, and practical. To do what? To get actionable daily information that you can actually get some information that's going to impact your clinic and your patients, and not just be some sort of pie in the sky that you can try to obtain, but you don't have the resources or you don't have that patient population. So we started, we got a small cohort of physicians, and over a 2-year time, we were able to enroll 3,000 patients. From that, we reported the first orthobiologic report in January of 2021. They gave sort of an overview of things we found of interest, and continue to add to that to try to impact patient care. So if you're considering collecting data, you should think about how you're going to do that, from your own pen and paper and an Excel spreadsheet to going to a company. And so you want to first define what is that goal you have. And then when you choose a database, will that database be able to meet your goals? How easy is it for the patient and or your staff to get their information into that database? And once you get it in, can you get it out? How easy is it to report it? What does it look like? Is it meaningful data, or is it just a bunch of data points? You may want to get 100 data points, but you may follow 100 patients and only get one patient to fill out those 100 data points. It's not going to be useful. Or you can say, hey, I want 5 meaningful data points, and you get it on 95% of the 100 patients. Now that actually is meaningful data that is actionable, that you can actually change what you do or expand that to other patients. What's the compliance rate? Are you getting, 5 out of 100 because it's so complicated? Or are you making it simple and getting a very high compliance rate? What's the security protocols of it, if it's especially electronics nowadays or software based? What does it integrate into any of your systems you have in your office? Is it IRB approved if you want to publish? Is it all de-identified so it's easier for you to, put up on your website or move around so you don't have to worry about protected health information? What are those hidden costs of dollars, time, staffing, other than just the basic, hey, it's X amount of dollars? There's a lot that goes in behind that. So just some summary points for the next couple slides, but real world data is valuable and generalizable. Real world data can impact daily patient care decisions, and it may be actually more relevant than placebo-controlled randomized level 1 trials. The best manner in which to collect these is still evolving, something we're really focused on to make it simple, user-friendly, practical, and actionable. Also and make sure we have good compliance rates for those patients. So what is that optimal response rate? 50% may be good, but if you have a homogeneous group, maybe less than that's good. If it's extremely heterogenetic, you may need a much higher level. But everybody should collect their own data if they're doing novel treatments. I think if they're doing any treatment. And so that you can say that you can publish legitimately on your website. You can market. You can say, I do X and my outcomes are Y. You don't need some other person's randomized trial to put it on your website. And you can then compare that to how everyone else does. If you're in a registry, you can pool that data so you get much larger data sets, and then you can start, slicing and dicing the data to find out, are there groups of people that do extremely well and this is the kind of treatment we should use for them? And are there other groups that just do extremely poorly that, this is not the right treatment. We're not sure what it is yet, but we know that treatment X we chose was just not really the best treatment. So there's a lot of work to do. We've started, you should start. You should start by collecting your outcomes, collecting your own outcomes, and then you can provide true informed decisions to your patients. You know your adverse events, you know your efficacy. You can tell the patient the timelines in which they can expect to recover from post-procedure soreness, time to have expectations of when they'll start feeling benefit, what kind of post-procedure recommendations you can make. Do they start non-weight bearing right after? Do they even need non-weight bearing? Should they start therapy in 4 days? Should they start therapy in weeks? Should they do independent therapy? Whatever your protocol is, make it, follow it, evaluate it by collecting your outcomes, and then, modify and refine it. What's the cost? If you have all these things detailed, you'll know your cost and you can translate to patients. What are the pros and cons? What are the treatment options that you can give to patients? You may have PRP and adipose and bone marrow. Is one better than the other? If you have your own data, you can say for X treatment, this might be better. And I can tell you, you can spend less money, Mr. Patient, because it's going to work better. Or, hey, Miss Patient, this is probably not well spent money because you're going to end up having to spend it again on something more expensive. And the patient understands, and then they can, spend their money. You can compare your data to the standard of care. You can inform self-indemnified plans. You can form regular insurance plans. You can inform patients. You can look at it from other alternative or other non-reimbursable treatments. And you can find out much sooner than taking years to do a RCT that may have flawed rationales. Sometimes there's so many parameters to decide such an orthobiologics that you're not really sure what to look at. And real world data with multiple data points and multiple providers can hopefully clear the smoke, get us down to maybe some very specific questions that then can be looked at in RCT. Regenerative treatments are innovative. Many treatments are innovative. Orthobiologics, and they're also disruptive. If we can eliminate 30 to 50% of surgeries, not going to be good for the surgical centers and the hospitals when they have facility fees that they're maintaining. Not going to be good for the surgeons. So we're going to get a lot of negative information put out. But if we have data talks, especially large data sets. And we can determine these things way in advance so that we can then say what is our safety and efficacy, and patients can make their own independent decisions. And you can legitimately market this data of what your outcome is. So I appreciate everybody signing in, listening, and hopefully some of that was eye-opening and thought-provoking. And if you want to learn more about how you can collect your data and start with something that's hopefully simple, user-friendly, practical, and in the near future, actionable, that's related to your particular practice and way you do things, and something you can use for marketing, and sort of sky's the limit about how to use this, then contact us. We can give you a webinar specific to it. this could be something maybe you can work with Valet Health or some other marketing group to try to get this data out there so that you can get patients in and just help more people. And we'll answer some questions toward the end of the presentation. And hopefully, like I said, that this has been useful for you.
Thank you, Dr. Bowen. We're now going to turn it over to Matty Crescenzo with Valet Health for the second part of our presentation.
Great. Thanks, Nancy, for the introduction. And really just want to say that I've appreciated the partnership we have with Data Biologics since last year in the summer and all that it stands for. And so and appreciate being able to present here as well. So tying into the theme, just as Dr. Bowen spoke about the significance of capturing and collecting data, that's going to be the common thread as well, but with respect to growing your practice and the marketing efforts that support that. So what we're going to look at here in this aspect of the talk is going to be more about marketing technology, growing your practice, and really doing it in a legitimate way with data, looking at substantive metrics. And just by way of just quick introduction, my name is Matty Crescenzo. I'm the founder of Valet Health. We're a healthcare digital marketing company, predominantly working in the spaces of interventional pain and with orthobiologics focused practices. So as we jump right in, I think, looking at overall how the landscape has changed, right? Given everything with COVID and patients increasingly going on online to be able to make decisions for their care. Statistics are now at almost 90% of people are making decisions for care based on online reviews. 4 out of 5 adults in the United States are using Google search prior to making a decision for their care. But when you look at specific data points, this one was really interesting that stood out on the study by HubSpot in 2021, that the average cost to generate a new patient lead was $286. And just as a frame of reference, that's a high number. It should be lower than $100 to generate a new patient opportunity. But from the data perspective, you should ask the question, well, what's my cost to generate a lead? My cost per lead for a new patient at your practice. If you don't know that, then that's definitely something to keep in mind. And I'll circle back to that at the very end of the talk when we talk about the 3 key performance metrics you should be looking at. So each program that we put in place, and I would recommend any program that goes in place from a digital marketing perspective, it really gets distilled to these 5 layers. This is a digital program pyramid for success. And you start from the foundational level and you work your way on up. So that's the reputation of physicians and clinic location information. The accuracy of that data is critical. We're definitely going to spend just a little bit of time looking at some examples of when it's left to chance. So you have reputation of physicians, locations, and then you have the technology that supports that. So from your website perspective to making sure that there's mobile accessibility, those bottom 3 layers are what we call passive growth. And then the active growth, very intentional efforts to target or modify your patient mix, right? So if you're trying to bring in specific patients for knee osteoarthritis or rotator cuff tears, whatever it may be, it then becomes testing and optimization to be able to attract the right kind of traffic and see what's converting into patients in the door. So getting to the foundational level of reputation, the first question is, how much of your online presence do you actually have control of? There is proliferation of unclaimed profiles out there about physicians on really high profile sites such as WebMD and Vitals. You're going to see what really spawns this sort of mess of information that's out there that's inaccurate. From a sample size of—
Matty?
Yes.
Can I just interrupt you? We can't see your presentation. Can you see if you can pop that open?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I have it. I have it shared right here. There we go. Let me know if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it now. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. So it's paused. Thank you, Nancy. So what I was referencing here was 70% of information about doctors and clinic information is wrong. That's a sample size of about 2,500 profiles in our system. And so that's a really high error rate when it comes to doctor profile information. Now, where that comes from are data aggregators such as Factual, Infogroup, Axiom, and then bigger, more well-known sites and search engines such as Google or Bing, WebMD, Vitals. So they automatically create these profiles. So whether or not somebody at the practice or a physician created it, it's not the point. They're out there, they exist, and patients are out there in interacting with them and leaving reviews. And so there's a significant amount of traffic in online activity, and we've seen this increase by about 26% year over year across the big three health information and review sites. So if you look at this information here on this on these trends, this is showing overall traffic visit volume across the big three: WebMD, Vitals, and Healthgrades. You could see by far the most online traffic is going to WebMD. That's the #1 website for self-diagnosing of health information. Then you see Healthgrades at 18.4 million, Vitals at 4.1. But leaving it to chance and having these profiles unmanaged is a significant issue that we see is very prevalent facing physicians and physician practices today. And then just some other statistics here on WebMD. 1 out of every 4 adults in the United States use that to be able to look up information about conditions they may have or symptoms. And when you leave it to chance, there are also competitors that are featured providers that are running ads on your profile and on your name. This is something that's very common. And I'll show you a couple other examples of where that happens as well. And then the same thing we often come across too are Vitals profiles, which is one of the largest sources of physician ratings. These profiles are often claimed, unclaimed, and you'll see a little notification or you'll see a link that says claim your profile. And often it's very challenging for practice managers or physicians to be able to corral that information and ensure the accuracy of it. Here's an example when you have a WebMD profile that is claimed and that is converted into something called an enhanced profile. And when it's optimized, you'll have appointment request capabilities to be able to track all those form submissions. You have the ability to track by unique phone number as well, to look at how many new patient opportunities are flowing in through WebMD as a channel. And what we have seen on our side at Valet Health, we've seen that this is one of the most efficient drivers of new patients, not by volume, but on a percentage basis of new patients into practices. Specifically, it's very effective for practices in the categories of regenerative medicine, of pain management, orthopedics. So look at an example here of a Google My Business listing. Here's an instance of a practice location or physician listing that is unmanaged, is unclaimed. So oftentimes you'll see, physicians will move or practice at different locations, and all that information tied to where a doctor practices is really important that all those pieces are taken control of. They're claimed, they're optimized with the most accurate and recent information about the practice. That includes the procedures that you're performing, the types of conditions that you treat, and any innovations that you want to share and educate the public about in terms of the care that you provide. But obviously, coming across something like this, if you Google a physician name and it says permanently closed, is not the best way to put a good foot forward, to put it mildly. And so, mentioning that other point about competing practices, being able to take advantage of a physician name or a practice name, we also see this in sites like Yelp. So you may think, well, yeah, Yelp's just for foodies or restaurants, but it's actually another driver of new patient opportunities. And if these types of profiles as well are left to chance and left unclaimed and unmanaged, you'll see sponsored or featured results running on those types of physician or practice profiles as well. There are also searches, specifically in regenerative medicine that show, top doctors in regenerative medicine, top doctors in stem cells. Yelp is a way to be visible for that. Even though since September of 2019, Google had a crackdown and you can't run ads on keywords or search phrases such as stem cells and regenerative medicine. So there are ways around that. But Yelp is actually a mechanism that can drive and create new patient opportunities. And then the other thing we see as well in interventional pain and also in biologics focused practices are chiropractors very aggressive in running ads on a practice name, on a physician name. And so just one of the things that you should be aware of is looking at or asking your digital marketing support company for, what's the competition look like? Are there ads being run on our practice name, on our physician names of the practicing providers? Be really important to know that, to be able to help differentiate messaging in your own ads or in your own content that you're publishing on your website, such as your blog or sharing on social media. So tying back to this whole theme from the reputation perspective, you need to be able to quantify a number of information that's inaccurate, right? So there are tools out there that will scan a network and give you sort of a diagnostic and an error rate of your information if it's matching doctor name and location or practice name and location. So that's one of the questions to be able to ask a provider that you're working with from a digital support perspective of what's that error rate, what's your baseline error rate, and then really start to dig into which specifically sites are managed or unmanaged. And you want to be looking for what we call the big four. Those are WebMD, Google, Vitals, and HealthGrades. That's where the most consumer volume and online traffic volume is currently. And so you want to make sure that you have those properties, those physician profiles for sure, locked down, claimed, and optimized. Then the other piece of it is being able to capture and increase the volume of positive patient reviews. And so having a mechanism for you to do that, whether you're scanning a QR code card that is capturing reviews for your practice, whether you're doing it by text or by email campaigns, being able to have those positive patient reviews captured so that you can attract more of the types of cases that you're trying to bring in, whether that's for newer therapies such as Shockwave or whether that's for PRP. You want to be able to try to get as many of those positive patient reviews. You also want to take those same types of reviews and turn those into larger success stories that you can publish on your website, you could share on your blog, again, to build overall organic visibility for the types of patients you want to bring into your practice. So as far as a couple of tips and takeaways, as I had referenced, really see if you can get to the profiles percentage error rate for physicians and practice locations across those big four sites, WebMD, Google, Vitals, and HealthGrades. And so the other piece of it, as we talked about that program pyramid and the health hierarchy of digital, the common thread throughout all of that is being able to look at substantive growth metrics. Are you currently receiving those from a data perspective with the digital support provider that you're working with or anybody on your marketing team? And those substantive growth metrics are, what is the cost to acquire a patient? So regardless of the activities that you're doing, these could be Facebook ads, they could be display retargeting, they could be Google ads, they could be through the WebMD program that we were looking at. So those are, you want to look at leads and a cost to generate a new patient lead. You'll need to know too, the cost to acquire a patient. And then the third part is return on investment. So you want to know the return on investment in aggregate so that you'll know if your marketing dollars are working for you. And then you'll specifically want to know the return on investment per channel or per activity. So if you know where the more effective campaigns are running, you obviously invest more dollars into those types of campaigns and activities. So just be sure that whomever you work with, you're asking these types of questions on these substantive metrics to be able to ultimately improve and build visibility for your practice and bring in those types of patients. And then last couple of points here, an interesting study from the State of Digital Marketing in Healthcare, and this is from early 2021, 55% of healthcare marketing executives monitor conversion related metrics. That seems like a really low number, right? Should be a higher number than that. So then you ask the question, well, how are new patient conversion metrics reported to you. And so conversion can be defined in different ways, but we want to think about it from the standpoint of the conversion of people that go from your site to people that opt in and give their information, right? See if they're a candidate for your procedures or your services. But also the other piece of conversion is patients in the door. And so there are ways to be able to tie off and attribute where the patients came from. That's the level of conversion that really matters to get to return on investment. And so overall, from a marketing data perspective, to summarize it, you want to be able to get to a program return on investment. And those three performance metrics are cost per lead, cost per acquisition, return on investment. Those are measured on an ongoing basis. You evaluate that on a monthly cadence with your digital support provider. If this is not something that you're currently receiving, just ask these questions. Ask the hard questions, and then just press for answers on how that level of insight can be provided to you. And then if it is, who's ultimately responsible for analysis? Is it something that you or somebody at the practice is responsible for doing, or will those insights be served up to you so that you know what's next and you can have a proactive approach to grow in your practice? So overall, if you would like to learn more about the combined package that we offer with Data Biologics on Valet Health, we offer a report card analysis, free report card analysis, where we can provide some data insights of value. Again, we really appreciate the partnership with Data Biologics, and also as part of the Toby networks and the mentors plan, we are also offering this report card analysis with additional insights. So we appreciate the affiliation and partnership with great organizations such as these. And I'll turn over to Nancy now for any section of Q&A that you want to cover. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matty. We're going to turn it over to our Q&A session now. We do have a couple of questions. Hi, Dr. Bowen.
Hello.
So the first question we received are, and this is related more to you, Dr. Bowen, what treatments and products does your Data Biologics platform allow us to track?
So that's a sort of detailed question or answer, I guess. But I can summarize it mostly in the fact that if it's an orthobiologic or a regenerative treatment option for orthopedic related injuries, we track it, or we can modify it somewhat to track. What do I mean? If there are 65 different PRP companies out there and we are tracking 13 and you come in with a new one, we can add that, with a click to our database. So we're open to doing some slight modifications if we don't have it readily available by anyone, other client that we have.
Thank you. I did receive a text question here. How do you get patients to enroll and fill out surveys?
Well, the first thing we found is we don't call them surveys. So there are a lot of nuances that we're trying to figure out over time to increase compliance. And probably the most important thing is, these people are invested in their care. They're spending their own hard cash for it. They're seeing you. They really are tied into the physician who's treating them. And if the physician who's treating them asks them nicely and, encourages them to do it, there's a much higher compliance rate. So a lot of it is just teaching the office and even the physician that says just a simple thing to the patient. I really would appreciate it if you would just fill out this information for me to figure out how you're doing. And then we can follow up later and see how much better you're doing. We can potentially compare that to everyone else in either other areas. Most of the time you get buy-in from patients like, yeah, I'd love to do that for you. So we will continue to work over the time to continue to maximize that compliance and find whatever little nuances we need to and continue to share that with our clients to maximize that compliance so we get better data, and that's what it's really about.
Great. And then another question for you, Matty, is how long does it take for the report card on a practice? Is it a 5-day turnaround for a physician to obtain that information, and would you go over that with that practice?
Yeah, it would be the following day. So yeah, within 24 hours, and during regular business days, and it would be something where we would walk through the insights. So we'll have one of our team members, if not myself, one of our team members will walk through the findings and insights and recommendations. But we actually will also provide specific information sourced from sites like WebMD with consumer data in your zip code for regenerative medicine, and things like that. That's information that is very difficult to obtain. You could get it from WebMD, but it's something that we'll provide. But yeah, we pride ourselves on quick turnaround and providing actionable data of value. Without any obligation. We want to be able to educate about being able to solve this problem.
Wonderful. And then another question I received was, in regenerative medicine, a lot of doctors like to treat multiple joints at one data service. Does the Data Biologics platform, is there a way to track multiple treatment locations in one data service?
There are, and that's the, I guess, advantage of having this essentially designed by physicians for physicians, and not just physicians, but ones that do orthobiologics on a daily basis. And that is some of the difficulty, is trying to figure out when you have someone who's got two knees that you're trying to track, or someone comes in and goes, well, I'm getting fat. Can I have my two knees and my shoulder? And then they come in a week later and go, how about my finger with some PRP? So those are struggles that we work with every day. We can definitely put in multiple treatments. It's when sometimes you have that patient who has more than a couple treatments that are repetitive. Sometimes that might be a patient you want to just pull out of the database because it's just going to be so confusing as a so one-off. But yes, we track multiple treatments, whether it's a, say, series of treatments where I want to do 3 PRPs every 2 weeks for the knee joint and follow that for years, or whether it's I'm doing 2 knee joints at the same time with different treatments, or that I'm going to have some protocol that I have in place where, I have, I do prolotherapy, I do PRP, I do adipose, or I mix and match. All that can be done with a click of the button. And we are just modifying a little bit now where we're including shockwave, and to make it a little easier to enter, where you'll do a shockwave, usually a series, that you enter the first one, and then you can sort of do like a click and say it repeats it. And then you just have to change the data service, so that automatically changes it. And then maybe the joules or the number of shocks you include. So some of these more repetitive series treatments, we're just going to modify a little bit to make it as easy as possible for people to get the data in, because we have that moniker as SUP: simple, user-friendly, and practical. So whenever we have our clients request, we always listen. We talk it over amongst the 3 physicians that do this daily, and we try to come up with what is best for the product and our clients. And you guys have great ideas, our clients have great ideas, but we always have to put it through that filter and that lens of, let's not go down the rabbit hole of different things. Is this actually something that's going to make the data better, more actionable, and make it simple to get data in so that we get answers out?
Thank you. Well, that seems to end all the questions that we have. So we'll go ahead and bring our presentation to a close. I do want to thank you to our speakers for their excellent presentations, and thank everyone for attending today's webinar. All the live webinar registrants will actually receive a complete recording of the webinar by email. And please join us in early February 2022 for our second webinar in the series, where we'll present practical aspects of implementing data outcomes in a physician practice setting. On behalf of Data Biologics and Valet Health, thank you for joining us today, and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.